Hello! So Star Trek finally made a Christmas episode. Yippey-Kai-Yay! Just kidding. They've actually made one before. Next Generation did. It's called Starship Mine, Season 6, where Picard got to play John McClane in that one. Okay, so, yeah, none of that's really a criticism. You know, Star Trek does die hard. It's more of an observation. You know, it's a good format. It's a good... I mean, that's an amazing movie, and if you disagree, you're wrong. You know, just one of those things. So in this episode even had our hero, Michael Burnham, going through the ship, spilling blood everywhere, and bare feet for a lot of it. I actually do love homages when they're done well, so I guess there's that. So Osira, she had just taken over Discovery in the previous episode, ends up getting her meeting with the Federation, with which Admiral Vance is authorized to negotiate on behalf of the Federation. Well, on behalf of the Federation president as his stand-in, or their stand-in. I guess we shouldn't assume that the Federation president is a male. Which furthers my thoughts that the Federation is actually run by the military. So I think Vance may actually be the Federation president, as well as the CNC of Starfleet. So this might be a case of you're not going to know who the president is, even though it's me. So that's kind of where I think that's going. So Osira wants the Emerald Chain to merge with the Federation, and she makes an extremely compelling case that in this world, this after the burn, it's actually a necessity. And she's apparently extremely genuine about it, as the holographic polygraph, they call him Eli, has indicated. So whenever she would say anything, you know, Eli would confirm. She's being honest with you. She is telling the truth. So there's a few back and forths, you know, they're mostly fruitful. But speaking of fruitful, they mentioned that a replicated apple was actually made out of shit. That scene amused me probably more than it should have, but that's probably because I'm not really above toilet humor. So Admiral Vance ends up reading the terms of Osira's proposal for the Emerald Chain Federation merger, but noticed a glaring omission. Osira is a war criminal, and for anyone to take this merger seriously, not only can she not be the figurehead of the Emerald Chain anymore, which actually she agrees to, like, okay, you know, I get it, but she also needs to stand trial for all her war crimes. And she is not prepared to do that, which actually kind of shows that even though her initial motivation seems like, I do what I do for the good of the people, which was actually the original title of this episode, it shows that no, that's really not her motivation at all. Because you'd see, like, with regular Starfleet folks, if they were in the situation like that, it really would be I will stand trial for my people, for the good of my people, that kind of thing. And I believe in Deep Space Nine that ended up being the case with when the Dominion War ended. I mean, spoilers for that, where the female changeling ends up having to stay behind and face charges and cannot go back to her people. And that's why Odo had to go back to their people to cure them of the virus that Section 31 infected them with. So Osira was absolutely not cool, and clearly it was a deal breaker. So she ends up just, you know, it completely nosedived the discussion. On board Discovery, Burnham ends up pulling a full John McClane, as I mentioned earlier, traveling around the USS Nakatomi Plaza, trailing blood, and loses her shoes. I mean, Star Trek has done blatant ripoffs before, and I certainly don't mind. I just wish the episode aired a week earlier, so that the Die Hard is a Christmas movie debate that we have every year could have been something the episode really leaned into as a little bit of a wink and a nod. I enjoyed that Osira, in a lot of ways, turned out to not be the mustache-twirling villain she appeared as she was when she was first introduced. I mean, hell, she just she didn't hesitate to kill her own nephew. And I appreciated that when her scientist explained to Stamets, and that there's much more to this person, and then Stamets retorted that she may be more than she appears, but she's also exactly how she appears, which is actually proven by her refusal to take responsibility for her actions in this Emerald Chain Federation merger discussion. But I do wish that throughout the season we had spent some more time seeing things from her perspective, to get more sympathy for her, to get more sympathy for the point of view of the Emerald Chain. Because this scientist guy, he's actually played by Kenneth Mitchell, who he actually played a couple different characters throughout Discovery. He played Cole in season 1. And he also played the albino Klingon, I forget his name though, in season 2. The actor has since developed ALS and required to be in a wheelchair for to film this episode. And so that was written into the script. And his character spoke of the personal story of how Osiris saved him when everyone else would have just let him die. And there's something to be said for that. It's touching. He has a personal story, a personal connection with her, and it seems like he doesn't quite realize until the moment that Osira just shoots Rin in cold blood that maybe Stamets is right about her. I think her death will probably ultimately be by his hand. That's part of my predictions for next week. I don't necessarily think they're going to wrap up every storyline thread that they need to in the one remaining episode. But I do still think that the storyline will probably overlap with next season. At least I'm really hoping it does, because I think if they do wrap everything up in the one last episode, it's going to be sloppy as hell and probably not make much sense, which is actually probably what they're going to do. But no, I anticipate, this immediate threat with Osira in getting the Kelpian and everyone safe is going to be resolved next week. But I think problems with the Emerald Chain are going to continue, and that's going to be a big issue next season. That's part of my prediction. So other kind of more specific predictions. The Michael appears to be recording something, I think, for her mom. I'm not sure if it's something that she was recording or if it was a message to be sent off. But it was for her mom, which leads me to believe that Navarre and probably the United Earth and Trill, I mean, those seeds were planted. They're all going to end up coming to the rescue by the end of next week's episode. And I also kind of like that the scientist, Ken Mitchell's character, ends up mentioning that the 22nd century appears to be a heyday for scientific advancement, referring to the spore drive and things like that. Things that had been forgotten about over the years. Things that a lot of the fandom menace complain about, Yeah, sure, it was probably an oversight to have such a transportation system that in a prequel series that didn't necessarily make sense. And I don't necessarily like how they were just like, well, you know what? While we erase everything to have to do with Discovery because it needs to leave this time, and there can be no record of it having, where it went. I still don't see an explanation on what the spore drive issues really were, why that had to be deleted from history. So, whatever. Anyway, so I really enjoyed this episode. It was one of those ones that you could just watch and enjoy. I mean, it had a lot of scenes where two people in a room just kind of doing their back and forth. That's the classic Star Trek trope, and that was all done well. And it had a lot of action. So, I mean, it seemed to really do what it needed to. And I'm really hoping that we have a good payoff next week, because this, just how these stories end up going, you can end up with a story that's great, and then it's totally ruined by the ending. Or as, if you've seen my commentary on the Terra Firma two-parter, the exact opposite is true. Somewhat lackluster story can just be elevated to the next level if the ending is very satisfying. So, well, let's hoping we have a satisfying ending. I am cautiously optimistic. I think the writing this season has been pretty good, but I'm still not quite on board that the writers are necessarily as competent as they need to be to pull off everything they appear to be trying to pull off. Well, I guess I will discuss this with you next week. Until then.